All right, here we go. We're going to put 32 minutes on the clock for the first quarter, guys. And we are going to talk high school football. And right now we're in the playoffs. We're in the District 3 playoffs. So as the clock will get started right now, Eric, we saw 3 of our local football teams get into the District 3 playoffs, and they had some tough matchups. And unfortunately, all 3 of them lost, but Warwick, Manheim Central, and Cocalico. And Warwick had a pretty tough matchup against Governor Mifflin. Manheim Central was upset. Which one was more surprising to you, what Governor Mifflin did to Warwick or what happened to Manheim Central?
I'm going to say probably the loss for Manheim Central, because I think everybody knew what Warwick was going to be up against in Governor Mifflin, which is one of the top teams in the state. Manheim Central at home is usually a very tough place for opponents to come and play. And the way that Manheim Central's defense had played this year, I thought this really could be a tight ball game. I thought we could see a lot of points. I didn't expect it to get out of control like it for Manheim Central when Exeter went up 36-0 at halftime. In fact, at halftime, walked into the other part of the booth, and there was a radio crew there from Reading, and the one guy looked at me and he says, "Do you believe what's going on here?" And I said, "No." I said, this kind of caught me by surprise, and he said, "We never anticipated this either." So take nothing away from Exeter. I mean, they were the better team Friday night, and they showed it in all aspects.
Yeah, Tim, you were doing stats for that game. I was up on camera, and it just kind of kept steamrolling out of control for Manheim Central. What were you impressed about with Exeter? Again, the ground game was fantastic. Eric Nangle had like 230 yards, 303 touchdowns. I thought he could have had more, really, if they had to get more from him. What were your kind of recollections from that game?
Well, first, when you look at the stats coming into that ball game, their ground game, I think, was even averaging, 250 or 260 a game. They almost eclipsed that in the first half. And they did it with relative ease. Nangle just ran the ball right up the middle. They weren't doing any misdirection. They weren't doing any jet sweeps, a little bit of screens, a little bit of down and outs, maybe occasionally. But for the most part, they were going right at the teeth of Manheim Central. And Central did not have an answer for them. And it was just strange to see. And I don't know where the safeties were. I don't know where the linebackers were, if they were cheating up a little bit. But obviously Exeter saw something, Chad, on the film. I was stunned. Eric said that a couple of times during the telecast. I think we all were. No one has really seen a Manheim Central team just get down that fast or by that many points that quickly. Mm-hmm. And you saw really Manheim Central scored a lot of points during the year, but didn't really have an explosive offense, if you will. They had the ground game was completely shut down. They only ran the ball 9 times, which I can't remember even a Manheim Central team just running it 9 times. So those are the 2 big things I think that really just stood out for me in that game.
As a member of the media, we're always kind of looking at matchups and paths through brackets. And I thought Manheim Central had a good chance to get to the district finals and take on Governor Mifflin there. And I would have loved to see Governor Mifflin versus a Manheim Central team that had come to play. We won't get to see it, unfortunately. But Governor Mifflin did play Warwick, and we did not get to see it, but we were hearing some really eye-popping statistics from that game as we were doing the Manheim game. Warwick and Governor Mifflin were duking it out, and they were just scoring at such a clip. Eric, Nick Singleton had 330 yards, something like that on the ground, 7 touchdowns, his best performance of the season in the playoffs against a pretty decent Warwick team. As you're doing the game at Manheim and you're hearing what's going on in Governor Mifflin territory, what were you thinking, and how impressed were you that Nick Singleton could do that in a playoff game?
Well, it does come as a surprise because this guy has done it pretty much all season long. What gets me is that, he has not played 4 quarters in a game, and the guy has rushed for 37 touchdowns this year. I mean, Mifflin has just been blowing out opponents all season long, and knew what they were getting into and went toe-to-toe with them. I mean, it was 21-14 at the end of the first quarter. Jack had a good night. The question was going to be, would Warwick be able to slow down the Mifflin running attack. And actually, they didn't have the answer. But then again, every other opponent for Mifflin this year didn't have the answer as well either. So it was one of those nights, and Mifflin is moving on. I have not had a chance to see Nick Singleton. From what I have heard, that people have seen him play. Now, I saw him 2 years ago when he was a sophomore.
Yeah.
He's gotten a lot bigger, a lot stronger, and a lot faster. And he was a good running back as a sophomore. So he is no doubt one of the elites, not only in the state, but in the country.
It is interesting to point out, Cacalico did shut him down in a playoff game his sophomore year. So that was the last time Nick Singleton let anybody shut him down as a running back. Tim, we talked a little bit about on Sports Talk a little bit ago, that a couple of days ago, that Nick Singleton has not rushed below 100 yards in a game and has had at least 3 touchdowns or more in each game that he's played this year. He's coming to Penn State. How impressed are you with what he can do, and how excited are you for him to be coming to your Nittany Lions?
I must admit, I was in the booth with Eric keeping stats, and I did have the game streaming for the first couple of minutes just to see. And my gosh, it was 14-7 before he even knew it, because he had touchdown runs just very quickly. He scored 13 seconds into the game. Penn State fan, I am just excited. I can't wait to see him even get bigger and faster with the Penn State weight room training table and the speed training that they are going through. I think Locker had the best quote. I saw this in the paper a couple of days ago when he said, "This was a college kid playing above high school kids." And I think that's really all you can say. And look at it. Mifflin does not throw the ball hardly at all. I don't know whether they don't have the talent or because they don't have to. But here's a team that everybody knows what's coming. They're going to give the ball to Nick Singleton or to somebody else. You can put 10 other people in the box. I don't think you can even stop that kid. He is just that good.
Yeah, he is. All right. Wow. We are ticking down to 25 minutes. We have about 1 minute to go here. So we will get this in 1 minute. Then we will call a timeout just to save us here a little bit. Cacalico, Berks Catholic, kind of a toss-up game, 5-4 matchup. Cacalico is hanging in there, but then Berks Catholic at the end kind of runs away from them, pun intended. Eric, bummed to see Cacalico's season come to an end. Were you hoping to maybe get to see them play McDevitt there in the next round?
Yeah, because I mean, we were following the scores, throughout the evening, and when it was 7-7, 7-7. I mean, it stayed 7-7, and all of a sudden, bloop, now it's 14, now it's 21, and I saw that they gave up a couple of long touchdown runs mid to late fourth quarter, and then spelled the doom for Cacalico. Disappointing, I'm sure, because this was a team that was fun to watch. I mean, this running attack for Cacalico, and it was more than Anthony Barraza. Granted, he was the keystone to that running attack, but he had a lot of guys when they touched the ball could go the distance, and it's just a shame it came up a week short for them.
All right, let's call a timeout. Right, just past the 24-minute mark. We almost hit it. Right now we are at 23:45, I believe, or 23:50, somewhere in there. Eric, let's talk. First of all, I was hoping to see Barraza get to 2,000 yards. I thought that would have been cool to see Barraza get that on the ground, but we're not going to see that. And unfortunately, his senior year comes to an end. But that does kind of roll us in nicely to the next kind of subject that we want to do. And again, we did it on Sports Talk. So I'd love to get your thoughts here on the podcast. Running back. So first of all, the LL League doesn't hand out overall awards. They do award section by section awards to the best players at the positions, yada, yada, yada. And Man, Touchdown Club hands out player of the year and lineman of the year. But for us, I wanted to get your thoughts on who you thought was the best at each position. And we'll start with running backs. Running back of the year, there's several candidates, but obviously there's one that stands out above the rest. Could you give us your reasoning as to who you would pick?
To me, it is Anthony Barraza from Cacalico. From start to finish. I mean, this guy, the only game aside from the last one against Berks Catholic when he rushed for 99 yards, the only other game he was held to less than 100 was against Governor Mifflin, and he had to leave that early due to an injury. So this guy put up 100 yards throughout the year, and 2 300-yard rushing games. No, I'm sorry, 3 No, two 300-yard games, two 200-yard games, and 9 of his 23 touchdowns this season were runs of more than 50 yards. I mean, this guy was just explosive every time he touched the ball. In that game against Garden Spot that we had, he had close to 200 yards at halftime because he had an 80, a 70, and like a 30-yard touchdown run. So he start to finish Anthony Barraza.
Yeah, Tim, I know you're probably going to agree there. How impressed were you with Barraza this season that we got to see him play?
Well, again, Calico has been running their offense for so long. The teams in the LL League know what's coming year after year. They prepare for it, and he still beat them, right? What impressed me was when we saw some clips and highlights of him, how he just outran linebackers and defensive backs. He explodes through the line, gets to the linebackers, and then is off. It's the reason why Calico had such a great year. He is good. Look at some other running backs, of course, over at Ephrata, Andre Weidman, decent year. We'll see him next year. And Mr. Royer over in Warwick. But I agree with Eric. Barraza just had a tremendous year. You, Chad, would have loved to have seen him get up to 2,000 yards. Obviously, one more game. If they would have lived to play another game, he would have gotten there.
Yeah, they were close. I mean, it was 7-7 heading into the end there, and a very senior-heavy line as well. So they're losing a lot from this year. So we'll see what the Calico Eagles are next year. But obviously, no one's worrying about that right now. Let's move on to wide receivers of the year. We've had some great players all over the board this season. So obviously another one kind of comes from one of our local teams, Eric. You talked about it on Sports Talk again. Yeah. Again, people can see our whole segment on Sports Talk. If they want to see it, I'll probably be posting it on YouTube. It's probably up there by the time you see this. But who impressed you at wide receiver this year in our LL League?
Well, and I have to look at Warwick and Cooper Eckert. Because coming into the season, Cooper Eckert was the only returning player with a reception from a season ago, and he had 9 receptions last year. So I think it was quite evident that he and Jack Reed, it showed that they worked a lot together in the offseason, because what he do in his first game against LS, he has 223 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. And that just seemed to catapult him throughout the rest of the season. Ends up being the leading receiver in the Lancaster-Lebanon League, not only in receptions, but also in yards. 6 games where he had over 100 yards receiving, and he was no doubt Jack Reed's go-to guy. And I think his consistency week in and week out, just a guy that not only Jack Reed, but Coach Bob Locker could count on with a big reception.
Yeah, Warwick has really started to build up a nice run of wide receivers too. Yes. I mean, if you think back, from Eckert, you go back to Caleb Schmitz last year. If you go back before that Trey Glass was there. If you go back before that, Carter Forney at some point was in there. And I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2 more guys, but they have really done a nice job of stacking up receivers. So I've been very impressed with what Warwick's done there. Helps to have a good quarterback that can sling it as well. Tim, your thoughts on wide receivers? We did see a couple of good ones in the LL this year, including Owen Sensenig from Manheim Central. So how do you feel there?
Yeah, he'd be the one that would be close second for me. I agree with Eric. It's going to be Cooper Eckert just because of the stats and because he was Jack Reed's go-to receiver. But Owen Sensenig, though, really impressed with him. He seemed to make every catch. Unfortunately, I think for Manheim Central, it was just Sensenig. And we talked about on Sports Talk, the one thing that Cooper Eckert had and Jack Reed had was a compliment to Eckert, Fink. So you can take a little bit of the attention away. That allowed Cooper Eckert to get open a little bit more. But I still think that Cooper Eckert, I'm sure he has a good career in college. I'm not sure I'm sure he's being recruited, although I haven't heard any names.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything either. And remember, Caleb Schmitz won the Player of the Year award last year for the LL from the Manheim Touchdown Club. Yeah. So that's 2 years now that Warwick has had, one of, if not the best receiver in the league. So again, it just kind of goes to what I was saying. All right, let's move on to quarterbacks. We had Reed in our league or in our coverage area, and that was about it. Well, Judd Novak as well for our coverage area, but Eric, there's really a guy in this conversation that you really like, and you never got to see one single snap
No.
live this season.
No, and I tell you what, when the schedule came out and I saw this Columbia Ephrata game on the schedule, I was really excited because I thought, we knew coming into this season that Ephrata was going to be an improved team based on what we had read about Columbia. We heard a lot about Robert Footman and what he could do. Well, all of a sudden the season started and he just started slinging the ball all over the place to the tune of over 3,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, just 10 interceptions. I mean, 3 times this year, he had a 5 touchdown game. 2 times he threw for 4 touchdowns. I mean, this guy week in and week out was just throwing touchdown passes. And, despite the fact that he put up the big numbers, the question is, all right, well, yeah, anybody could do that when you throw that often, but opposing defenses knew that they'd like to throw the ball, but just did not have an answer as a way to stop them. And what's he do in his last game? Sets a Lancaster Lebanon League record by throwing for 536 yards, albeit in a loss to Upper Dauphin. But that just right there, that was just the stamp on an outstanding senior season and really a career for Robert Footman.
Yeah, their offense was pretty dynamic. It was a shame we didn't get to see that on Blue Ridge. Just that whole, I don't know, the whole COVID changing schedule. That was a bummer. Tim, you're quarterback of the year nominee.
Going to be disagree with Eric a little bit. Of course, the guy from Columbia that Eric just mentioned had a great season, obviously, with the stats. I just wonder if he's playing against better competition in Section 1 and Section 2 year in and year out, whether those numbers would be as gaudy as they are. So I'm going to go with Jack Reed out of Section 2. I just saw him at least 3 or 4 times this year. This guy is cool in the pocket. And he hits his receivers and he throws a nice football, guys. So I'm going to go with Jack Reed.
And Jack Reed's coming back next year. I'd have to think one of the higher rated QBs to return next season. So, it's one of those things where had a great year this year, probably one of the better ones coming back. I'd have to think, right, Eric? I mean, I'm trying to think of who.
Yeah, now he's going to have to hit the reset button because he's going to lose Cooper Eckert and Ryan Fink. So it's going to be an off season of building chemistry with some of the receivers that Warwick will be counting on next year.
Cool. All right, here's a curveball for you guys that we have not covered yet. Always have a ton of great coaches in the LL League. And of course, depending on how your team does and what they win and all of that goes into your resume, is there a coach that stands out above the rest, Eric, as to maybe who would be the coach of the year this year? I know that is a little bit tough to quantify, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Coach Vic Ridenour at Lampeter Strasburg. This is a game that we had on the schedule for the first game of the year, but unfortunately, due to the weather conditions Friday night, it had to be postponed to Saturday, and we couldn't get a chance to do it. But this is a Lampeter Strasburg team that really was decimated by the graduation rate. Lost a ton of players. Did have some key people back. But I think the way that he rallied the troops and, he's following behind, John Mannion, who was just built that LS program. I mean, year in and year out was a playoff contending team. And he decided, okay, now it's time to put my name to it. Didn't really change too much, but got the level of play up to what LS had experienced the last, decade or so. So, yeah, I think Coach Ridenour, I would say, would be Coach of the Year.
I actually kind of like that. Yeah, it goes outside our coverage area, but again, we know exactly, what they bring. Tim, your thoughts on Coach of the Year?
Yeah, quickly, I agree with Eric. Whenever you, as a coach, no matter what level, have to replace a legend, and John Mannion was a legend down in Lampeter. And like Eric said, it was a great team last year. He went to the state semifinals, lost a lot of kids. And he lost that first game to Warwick and has not lost since. So close second might be Bob Locker, just because of the great job that he did. Great team last year, lost 17 of his 22 starters and still managed to win a co-section championship. So he'd be second in my book, but Coach Ridenour certainly deserves number 1.
Perfect. All right. That'll wrap up the end of the year awards for LL football. It'll also wrap up the first quarter for us as we are we spent some extra overtime. We had to pay some extra money to get some extra time out time there.
4 o'clock management.
Nonetheless, love having those conversations. So we will bring Eric back for our halftime conversation, but right now we got to get on to the second quarter.